Welcome to Career and Leadership Real Talk, the no-nonsense guide for ambitious managers who want to have more impact and progress their career. I'm Pamela Langan, a job search coach and expert CV writer specialising in helping frustrated professionals land the jobs and pay rises they know they deserve.
And I'm Jackie Jagger, a leadership and mindset coach specialising in helping newly promoted and new to role leaders to avoid the dickhead trap and lead with confidence. Between us, we've helped hundreds of leaders and managers to find new roles, take ownership of their careers, and handle the challenges that job searches and leadership responsibility inevitably bring. And now we're joining forces to share with you what we know has worked for our clients.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode. Today, we are talking about the 5 mindsets that great leaders can adopt, regardless of the situation they're in. So whether you've just been promoted, whether you're thinking about a promotion, whether you're just thinking about becoming a more effective leader, this is going to be for you. And Jackie, our leadership expert, is going to talk us through these 5 mindsets that you can adopt to really start to think about your leadership skills and how you can improve them. So Jackie, where do we start with this?
So I think probably it's useful to put some context around where we've pulled these from. So as regular listeners will know, a lot of my specialism in coaching is working with people who are new into a leadership role. So they may have changed organisation, they may have been promoted, and typically within that first 12 months after they've started a new role is when I work with people. And what I've recognised is that so much of people's success is not on the kind of external elements of their role. It's on what I would call like the inner game. It's on how they can manage and lead themselves first, and really determines how effective and how much they can meet that aspiration. Because the people that I work with typically want to be great leaders. They care about their teams, they care about doing a good job. And with that, they often put a lot of pressure on themselves. And a lot of the work that we do in coaching is really working around that kind of mindset piece, that inner game, because then that allows them, it's a foundation effectively, that allows them to then layer some of those more practical skills onto the top. So yeah, that's a bit of context for where we've drawn these from.
Yeah, and I think it's so important, isn't it, building that strong foundation, that foundation of I know who I am, I know what I'm trying to do here, and then building on that. But I suppose when you're stuck in the day-to-day and you're trying to run a department, lead a team, it can all get a little bit chaotic, can't it? So where do you start? What's the first mindset that people can start adopting?
So the first one is lead as yourself. So authenticity has become a bit of an overused buzzword, but it is really crucial here. So this is that element of very often when you are ambitious and wanting to progress in your career, the temptation is to look around at people that are maybe further ahead than you, or, you know, your boss, other people within the organization, and to try and adopt some of the behaviors and approaches that you see people using. And we've talked about this many times in different episodes, but that only works when you find a way to do those things in a way that is true to you. Fundamentally, if you try and become someone you're not, or you try and hide who you really are, then that is going to show up. People are going to recognize that. And what that's going to do is you are going to damage the trust. If people recognize that you are putting a mask on, that you're not being true to who you really are, then the relationships that you build are going to be trickier, and you put yourself under a lot of pressure. So there's the element of finding ways to do it to be true to you. And sometimes what that leads us to recognize as well is that you have to reflect on who are you now and what is important to you as a leader. Who do you want to be in the way that you approach leadership? And that's a question that is really key for people to reflect on and understand. What do you want people to say? What do you want your reputation to be, your personal brand to be? So yeah, there's a lot in the mix under that header, but it's just knowing who you are, what's important to you, and finding ways to stay true to that. That's really the first mindset and the first kind of foundational piece.
Yeah, and that's so important, isn't it? Because like you say, like you can look at what other people are doing and you can try and copy that and you can try and be more like them. But when it's not authentic to you, it comes across a lot of the time as fake or who is this person? And then if you naturally go back to who you are and how you act, and then you just end up with this whole kind of jumbled persona, don't you? And people notice that. So I think you're right. If you've got that strong foundation, you know who you are, and you've looked at all of the different elements and also looked at who you want to become as well. Like that can be really helpful in moving forward. So what is the second mindset?
So the second mindset is name the fear, I've called it. And this is all around understanding that self-doubt is normal and having that awareness of that and being in a situation where you can therefore manage that degree of self-doubt. So unless you're an absolute psycho, then you are going to have self-doubt throughout your career as a leader. And the more that you put yourself in situations or circumstances where you're being stretched or where you're doing things for the first time, that does not indicate imposter syndrome. It indicates perfectly rational awareness that you haven't done this thing yet. And therefore, you've got no right to feel confident because you've got no expectation that it can definitely go well until you start to prove it to yourself. So self-doubt, for that reason, if you are somebody who is ambitious, you will stretch yourself and you will find things that will challenge you. Self-doubt is part of that. So you've got to know that is going to happen. And I talk about naming the fear because when that does happen, it's so important to be specific, to acknowledge it, to understand where it's coming from is part of what allows you to then be able to tackle it effectively.
Yeah, I love that as well because I think sometimes it's quite tempting, isn't it, to say, I feel like an imposter and then just stop because you feel like an imposter and you feel, oh, I shouldn't be doing this. Who am I to be in this position? Who am I to be telling people to do X, Y, and Z? And it can really knock your confidence. And I think it's almost like that feel the fear and do it anyway, like when you're naming the fear, because you're taking responsibility for it, aren't you? And you're going, this is where it's coming from. And then even just that reassurance that it is perfectly rational to feel self-doubt as you move through your career, like every new project you work on, every new team you take over, like it's absolutely fine, but it's recognize it and deal with it rather than let it derail all of your plans and all of your progression moving forward. What is number 3?
So number 3 is a real biggie. So I think this is probably the one that is hardest for me, for a lot of my clients, and most fundamental. And this is embrace being a work in progress. So when you're ambitious and you get an opportunity, the temptation is you want to prove yourself worthy of that. And I think that's what we've talked about in those first two, if you know who you are and you recognize that self-doubt comes with it. But I have an awful lot of clients who have such a drive to achieve. They want to prove themselves. They set really high standards for themselves and for others. And that really detrimentally impacts because for me, the way that this shows up, if I'm not embracing being a work in progress, then the way this shows up is I will do things independently rather than collaboratively because I will feel like I've got to show that I can be decisive and I know what needs to be done and I can get on with it. For others, it can show up as perfectionism. It can show up as I will overwork to get stuff done so that I can show that I can handle everything that's being thrown at me. People will work through to try and prove that they're resilient. And again, in the episode that we did on resilience, I talked about that was definitely a pattern for me before. So embrace being a work in progress is about, instead of trying to prove that you're competent, focus on improving your competence. So rather than trying to show that you're already the finished article and you're already good enough, this allows you to open the doors to continuing to grow, continuing to improve. But it's really hard to do when you want other people to think well of you.
Yeah, that is really hard, isn't it? And as you said, or when you said actually, embrace being a work in progress. I felt that funny feeling inside where you're just like, oh no, because it's not a nice feeling, is it? Like you want to be there, you want to be doing the thing, you want to be top of your game, but essentially we're all a work in progress, aren't we? Regardless of where we're at, because as soon as we think we've made it, then there's the question, like, have we really? But thinking about being a work in progress, it does make you feel slightly unsettled, doesn't it? Because you're like, oh, but I just want to be there. I want to be doing that thing. So I think that is definitely a really good one to think of, because I think if you can embrace that and you can just be like, I'm always learning, I'm always growing, I'm always moving forward, like, what does that look like for me and how can I create that plan? Then I think that's really helpful. Okay, so number 4 then.
So, number 4 is about something that we have talked about so many times on this podcast. And this is think, don't just do. So, when you're in the earlier part of your career, you are normally prized for your ability to get stuff done. And what that can then mean is when you move into a leadership role, you feel a need to be busy. You have a habit of constantly do. You also have a wider remit, and there are always more things to be done than you can get done. And so this is about really creating that opportunity to think. And that is hard from a practical perspective if your diary is absolutely rammed with meetings morning, noon, and night. But it's also very hard often from an emotional perspective, because there is this feeling of I need to support my team. I need to not let them break their backs working really hard. And I had this conversation literally a couple of weeks ago with somebody where I used to look and think, what do they do all day about senior leaders? And now I'm in that position. I've been drawn into the trap of trying to be outwardly busy so people can see that I'm doing the work. And that's come at the cost of having that thinking time, because I don't want people to think that I'm lazy or I'm not pulling my weight. So I think that emotional pull to be busy is often harder than dealing with the practical side of having a busy diary and a lot of priorities. So yeah, I think this is such an important one. And like I say, we've spoken about it so many times, haven't we, on here about why it matters to create that thinking time.
Yeah, it really does make all the difference as well. Both of us can honestly say that we've both become more effective in our roles, in our businesses, since we gave ourselves the time to think. And we say it all the time, don't we? You've got to give yourself that space. And I literally schedule that in now. At the weekends, I always give myself Saturday off. So I'm not thinking of anything on Saturdays, but Sunday is always like my thinking day. I've had a bit of a recharge on Saturday, and Sunday is the day where I will give myself like time in the calendar where I'm like, I'm going to go off for an hour and I'm going to use that as thinking time. And sometimes I try to resist it because I'm like, no, I've got stuff to do. I need to get things ready for next week. And I'm like, no, you've got to just have that 60 minutes of thinking time. Even if you're just thinking that you can't think of anything to do, you're just giving yourself that space and that headspace, aren't you? To just allow yourself to think and be creative and see what comes up, because I'm always surprised things that pop in when I give myself specific time to think.
Absolutely. I did it yesterday. So I had scheduled the day yesterday and I allowed a 2-hour block for doing. So I had a to-do list and I was like, I want to power through that. And then I'd allocated the time for thinking. And that literally, I could feel when you were describing about being more creative, I could literally feel my brain almost going, oh, I've got permission to not be in the doing, and just expanding and starting to think in different directions and sparking ideas and having that whole fizzy brain moment that does not come when you are in the process of doing. Doing is important. You have stuff that you need to get done, but the more senior you are, the more the thinking is what is going to really determine your effectiveness. It's if you don't have the capacity, if you don't create it for thinking time, you are not going to be at your most effective. So you've got to reverse that. And that is really tricky, but you've got to reverse that. You've got to create the thinking time first, prioritize that, give yourself that permission and that recognize the importance of it and really be ruthless with allowing it. But actually, I would imagine for most people, similar to my experience, when you do that, your brain really enjoys that process of kind of, I'm not being asked to do. I can now take my time and notice the patterns or understand the linkages or the priorities or whatever it may be for you in your role.
Yeah, and it's never easy to do at first. And it is something that you need to practice doing. And it's something that you always need to force yourself to do, because if you don't, you'll be like, oh, I'll do the thinking later. Oh, there's other things that take priority. So I definitely think that you need to schedule that time in to think. And even if you just sit there quietly for that amount of time, you're still going to be thinking, but it's going to take you some time to ease into it. So what's the final thing then? What's our number 5?
So the final one is building on embrace being a work in progress. And this is get uncomfortable being comfortable. And it's purposely that way round, because the traditional advice would be to get comfortable being uncomfortable. But actually, to be at your most effective as a leader, you are going to have to be outside of your comfort zone more than you're in it, because that's where you're stretching, that's where you're growing. When you're in your comfort zone, you're repeating what is already possible, you're repeating what you already know, you're doing the things that, and it is important to have some time in your comfort zone, but that is not where you're growing. So embrace being a work in progress is that kind of fundamental mental shift of I'm allowed to not be the finished article. And then get uncomfortable being comfortable is about really building on that and saying, actually, I've got to notice when I'm staying in my comfort zone. And that has got to be something that I will push myself out of when I notice. I will take on stretch projects and challenges. I will do things that I will risk failing, cocking up, having other people recognize that actually I didn't do that brilliantly, because that's how I'm going to learn. It's how I'm going to make my contribution. And that is a really big ask of people. I get that. But that is how you will be at your most effective, is by continuing to learn. And you can drive that by noticing the signs when you're in your comfort zone and saying, okay, I've got to push myself out of here now. I've got to do something that feels risky in order to stretch me.
Yeah, and it can be quite scary when you're in your comfort zone and you're thinking, when do I step out of it? What do I need to do to step out of it? And I think the first thing is just recognizing, isn't it, like that you are in that comfort zone, because it's, what does my comfort zone look like? What does it feel like? And now what am I going to do to step out of it? And I think when you start breaking it down, those steps to get out of it become much easier, don't they?
They absolutely do. And you don't have to go from one extreme to the other either. So getting out of your comfort zone doesn't mean doing some wild, crazy thing that is going to really take you to your kind of panic zone. What you want is to recognize, okay, everything I'm doing is repeating what I already know. How can I give myself some stretch? How can I give myself some challenge? How can I give myself some learning? And that can come in lots of forms. So it's not about pushing yourself so far out your comfort zone that you are not going to be able to function. Your brain will literally shut down when you're in panic zone. You will not be able to think at your best. You will not be at your best. So it's really finding the edges. It's finding the ways that take you beyond what you're already capable of, without pushing yourself to the extreme where you're just going to be stressed, burning out, taking on too much.
Yeah, and when we were talking about this episode, I think the key part of this is that this is not a to-do list, is it? It's literally a foundation for how you can approach either your new role, your development, or your leadership capability more broadly. And I think you're right in what you're saying. It's not going to be easy and you're not going to do them all perfectly from day one. But the more you focus, the more you think about what you want to do and how you're going to embrace them, I think that makes it easier, doesn't it?
And I would say to people, absolutely, they're not a to-do list. This is about understanding that these are some fundamental principles that when you practice them on a regular basis, make them part of how you operate as a leader, will support growth and ultimately your performance and effectiveness in leadership roles. Leadership is tough and it's messy and you're never going to be perfect. You're never going to perfectly adopt and display all of these, and you're certainly not going to go from being a perfectionist to, for example, to embracing being work in progress without that being a conscious practice. So I would say literally either list them out and have them there and just be able to sense check in and ask yourself, how am I doing against these? Or pick out one that you recognize that will be beneficial, that will support what it is that you want to grow and develop in your leadership capability, and really hone in on just being conscious in adopting that mindset, just reminding yourself of the elements of it, of why it's important, of how you can adopt it and how you can display it. And when you build that into your practice, that's when you're going to start to see some of those differences. But if you're trying to do all of this all the time, actually that takes us back to that perfectionist tendency of, no, you're just going to say that you're not doing a good enough job, and that's going to be catastrophic, and then you're going to feel like you're not doing a good enough job. Yeah, it's quite the reverse. It's be gentle with yourself, understand why these are important, and hold them lightly. Check in with them or pick one. There's no right or wrong, but it's really about just understanding what they are, why they matter, and how they can help, and then using them in a way that is right for you, for where you're at now.
Yeah, I love that you can just see where you're at and what's going to be most useful for you. And I suppose for our listeners, if you are stepping into a new senior leadership role or you're looking to become more effective as a leader, then definitely drop Jackie a message. She's got her Fab Leadership Launchpad program, which is designed specifically for leaders and is just gold, isn't it? It's gold for leaders that want to become more effective and want to progress in their careers. So drop Jackie a message and she'll be able to share all of the information around that. And as usual, thank you for listening. And don't forget to rate and review us on your favorite podcast platforms. And we'll be back next time with another episode.